Today we're looking at the latest NHL trade talk, focusing on teams like the Edmonton Oilers, the Vancouver Canucks, and the Dallas Stars and the Jason Robertson situation. Plus, with lots more players on waivers, lots more news from NHL training camps, some cuts, demotions. Plus, we also have some interesting news around the Montreal Canadiens and a potential alumni member maybe coming back to the organization. We'll discuss the possibilities coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a ton of NHL news and some trade talk to take a look at here today. So let's jump right in and get started. Of course, the NHL waiver wire is once again extremely busy. All kinds of players being demoted and need to go through waivers to get to the American Hockey League. There were no claims at all from yesterday. So all the players that we discussed in yesterday's video that were being sent through waivers for the purpose of being assigned to the AHL have cleared. So no claims yesterday. Today we have a bunch more, including New Jersey Devils have 3 players, including Robbie Russo, Joseph Gambardella, and Jeremy Grelot. The Buffalo Sabres have Sean Malone. The Columbus Blue Jackets have Brendan Gaunce. The Minnesota Wild have placed Zane McIntyre. The Penguins have Taylor Fedun. The Canucks have a variety of players here, including defenseman Brady Keeper and Noah Juleson, goalie Colin Delia, and forwards John Stevens and Guillaume Brisebois. The Montreal Canadiens also have a few players, including Mitchell Stevens and Anthony Richard. The Blackhawks have a few players, including Luke Phillip, Brett Seney, Dylan Sikora, and defenseman Nikolai Baudin. Now, Baudin is a former first-round pick. I'm surprised he still has not made the NHL. At this point, you got to remember, too, that was the first-round pick that was used to draft him, was the pick they got from the Minnesota Wild for Ryan Hartman. And at the time, based on Hartman's production, a lot of people were surprised that the Wild gave up a first rounder. I mean, look at them now. I think they're quite happy and content that they did that. Hartman's really blossomed in Minnesota over the past year or two, and Baudin is still not an NHL player. I know I watched him play a few times in junior as he was drafted. After, I really thought this kid had a lot of potential, and maybe he still does, but at this point, it's getting to the point that if you haven't made the NHL once you're 3-4 years past your draft year, then the odds of it happening are almost non-existent. So we'll see. I know the Blackhawks and the previous regime there might not have did a great selection there. After all, there were some other players that have gone on to make the NHL that I'm sure the fan base would have possibly rather have seen, but Baudin was drafted with a lot of potential. I don't know that we can really fault too much on the selection. Maybe it's the development. I don't know. It's just unfortunate no matter how you shake it. The Bruins have Connor Carrick, Nick Wolf, and Oscar Steen on waivers. I wonder if Oscar Steen would be an appealing player to some. I know last year he got an opportunity. I thought with the injuries this year, maybe he'd grab a chance to have a more, specified role. But obviously, I take it they're not pleased with this training camp and are willing to go in other directions. Now, I know I've been saying we'll find out at noon Eastern time tomorrow if there are any claims, but that's the way things used to be. I completely had forgotten that the waiver claims have actually had some changes this year, which was actually proposed by the Seattle Kraken after last year because of the difference in the East Coast and West Coast. Noon Eastern time is still pretty early on the West Coast, and for some of the West Coast teams, it's certainly challenging to have roster decisions made that early in the day, so they bumped it back a couple of hours. So it's actually 2 o'clock Eastern now before we get the news on who's on waivers, if there's any claims, etc. Of course, we saw some exhibition action over in Europe with the Nashville Predators defeating SC Bern in Switzerland. Of course, Roman Josi was the hometown hero in the game. Of course, he actually played for SC Bern as a teenager, played in that rink, spent time with that rink as a child, like when he was young. So it was nice to see the homecoming went extremely well. Josi's team not only won, but he scored a couple of goals and just had a really all-around great experience, I think, for him, for the team, for the fans. That's exactly the way you kind of hope those things turn out. You don't really want to see anybody get hurt. You want to see the hometown guys really shine. Of course, Niederreiter also had a good game too. So the Nashville Predators do well against SC Bern. And of course, the Sharks have an exhibition game today in Germany. On to some other injury updates and other demotions and signings and some other news around the league. St. Louis Blues young defenseman Scott Perunovich is going to be out for at least 6 months. So that pretty much will take care of the bulk of his season, requiring shoulder surgery. This was supposed to be the year he took a step and hopefully solidified himself. Of course, the former Hobey Baker winner, hasn't been a regular NHLer since turning pro, and I really thought this was going to be the year, but not, obviously being injured like that and severely is not going to make him go anywhere, that's for sure. A few other notable demotions among some of the players that were cut today. The Montreal Canadiens have sent Philippe Mesar, of course, who's their second first-round pick after Slavkovsky in the 22 NHL draft. He's going down to Laval along with Xavier Simoneau and a few others. And we also seen the Blackhawks demote Lukas Reichel. That to me came as a surprise. I thought Lukas Reichel would definitely not only make the team, but play a top six role, might even have a shot at playing with Patrick Kane. But comments from new head coach Luke Richardson said it made more sense to him for Reichel to play top line, power play, top line minutes, everything in the American Hockey League, rather than try to fight for a fourth line spot. And I'm like, Lukas Reichel to me is one of your top 5 or 6 forwards on the team, so I don't know how he'd be fighting for a fourth line spot. Maybe they just don't want to be any good, which we already know they want to tank this year. There's no real surprises there in Chicago. I think they're going for the bottom out for Bedard sweepstakes, but Reichel I thought would at least get a chance to play, and I can't say that that's part of that. Just that to me, that's a head scratcher. But maybe if you're a Chicago fan and you've probably seen him play more than I have early in the preseason and camp, leave me some comments and let me know if you think Chicago did the right thing there. A couple of players have been released from their PTOs. The Vancouver Canucks have released Denny DeKeyser. So that, unfortunately, is not going to lead to a contract for him in Vancouver. And the LA Kings have released Nate Thompson as well, who was there on a PTO trying to grab a bottom 6 forward spot. And that's not going to work out there either. So obviously, a couple of more veterans lose out on an opportunity to gain employment. Obviously, on to some other news. Could we see Patrick Waugh make a return to Montreal? I know he's a guy that's pretty polarizing figure. Some people absolutely love the guy, regardless of what you thought of him as a player. I know he's had his opportunities in the NHL with the Avalanche as a coach. We've seen him be the combination coach manager in the Quebec Ramparts. Word is that he will be vacating his GM role to Ramparts in the next year. He was seen in Brossard visiting the team while they were there, talking with, of course, Kent Hughes, Jeff Gordon. And this may not be anything more than an alumni visiting the team. Of course, the Canadiens, like a lot of teams, encourage alumni to come visit and kind of pay, get the chance to know the new players and just be around. And maybe that's all it was. But we do know that Patrick Waugh will always gain more media attention when these things happen because of the fact that he's been trying for so long and so hard to gain employment there. We know that when before Kent Hughes was hired, we know Patrick Waugh threw his hat in the ring to be the GM of the Canadiens. So we know there was interest there. We know back when Bergevin was running the team that he had talked to him about different roles. I think he even inquired about being the head coach. So we know that Patrick Waugh probably would prefer to work in Montreal if he's going to get back to the NHL. He's talked to the Habs on various occasions, and just obviously because of who he is created a little bit of a buzz around social media, but doesn't mean it's going to lead to anything. But could he be planting the seed or trying to figure out if there is a spot for him to actually be employed by the Canadiens? I don't know. I mean, I don't think at this point that he's going to be the GM, obviously, because he's certainly, that role is filled and it's a fairly new role. Ken Hughes won't be going anywhere for some time. Could he be an assistant GM? Who knows, right? Hard to say how things go. We know Patrick Waugh does have a history of being a little bit of a control freak. That's probably why he ended up leaving Colorado. It was a bit of a situation between him and Joe Sakic, where Sakic was the manager, but Waugh wanted to have more control over decisions, and they just kind of butted heads, and he ended up resigning. So we'll see if this leads to anything. It may be nothing, but certainly getting a lot of attention around the league, so I want to quickly touch on it. Around the trade front, you got to talk about Jason Robertson. Doesn't mean he's going to be traded. It makes you wonder sometimes, and it leads to rumors happening when things drag on and it appears as though there's a bit of a stalemate. Elliot Friedman's reported on his most recent podcast that it feels like both sides are getting very frustrated and that, they start to wonder where things are going to go. Obviously, at this point, Friedman suggested he still thinks it's going to be a 3-year deal, but there is some talk that could be a 4 or a 6-year deal. A 5-year deal, at least according to the feelings from the team, is probably Least likely, given that would walk him directly to free agency because of where his birthday is, and he needs 5 years of service before he can be UFA. So obviously that would be the earliest possible time for him. Maybe he's pushing for that. We don't know, but it's fair to say that the team probably wouldn't be crazy about that. They would probably prefer 3 or 4, so he'd still be a restricted free agent with 1 or 2 years of ARB rights remaining, or to go 6 or more, because then they'd be buying up some UFA years. But to go 6 or more is going to be challenging, because the longer you go, the bigger that AAV needs to be. Obviously, you're not going to pay less for more, right? That's just not how things work in the NHL. So if Jason Robertson's looking for, $8 to $9 million on a long-term deal, and you know what, maybe he's looking for more than that. I mean, Friedman himself predicted 3 years at 7.5. So can you imagine at 8 years for a 40-goal scorer who's young? I'm going to say he's probably looking for 9. I kind of wonder if the Kirill Kaprizov contract might be comparable, looking at the point productions and the goals. I don't know exactly if it's the perfect one to use, but just trying to figure out what Robertson's camp is trying to use as comparables to kind of plead their case, so to speak. And it does make you wonder. I know I've seen some commenting on the Matthew Barzal contract that came out today, which there is a dedicated video on the channel, which is why I'm not talking about it here. He got an 8-year deal just over $9 million per season. I've seen some comments saying, Jason Robertson probably thinks that's great. Obviously, look at Barzal's goal scoring versus his, and it's not fair to compare at all. For one, you get a center and a winger, completely different positions. Barzal's an elite playmaker, plays a premium position, number 1 center, and he is by far the best on the Islanders. So there's a lot of things that are kind of unique about that situation that I don't think are going to impact Jason Robertson. I mean, certainly looking around at some of the other younger centers, like maybe the Josh Norris contract, again, obviously not one draw comparison, but again, Josh Norris is young, similar age, scored 35 plus goals, goal scoring, but he's also a number 1 center. So again, different scenario. So I'm not sure exactly what the Robertson camp's using, but the fact that they're frustrated and, it just makes you wonder if things don't materialize. We already heard rumors about Buffalo kind of making some inquiries and have interest, but it doesn't mean it's going to go anywhere. There's not many teams out there that can do an offer sheet. I don't think Dallas is really in trouble that way. So we'll see. Just a situation that was worth monitoring and certainly makes you wonder where it's going to go. And I would hope for Dallas' sake that they come to terms, because they trade him. I think that it really puts a lot of question marks on their future, given that a lot of their other top offensive players are significantly older, at least, a lot of the good ones anyway. So we'll see. In Edmonton, a lot of people in Edmonton media are convinced that a Jesse Puljujarvi trade is all but inevitable and will happen before the season starts. Given how well Dylan Holloway has played, it's basically made Puljujarvi expendable. Holloway's had a tremendous preseason, and many feel at this point are penciled in the top 6 role, which would give you a top 2 lines of McDavid, Evander Kane, and Yamamoto, and Holloway with Draisaitl and Hyman. That kind of doesn't really give a spot for Puljujarvi there. You could put Puljujarvi on the 3rd line, but they feel like the 3rd line is set between Nugent Hopkins, Ryan McLeod, and Warren Foegele. And Warren, obviously Puljujarvi is not a 4th line player. So they feel like it's pretty much a given that he's on his way out. But the question here is, why not Warren Foegele instead of Jesse Puljujarvi? I would play Jesse Puljujarvi on the 3rd line with Nugent Hopkins and McLeod. I don't see personally what the big deal is. One of the two, though, I do think needs to go. Based on Dylan Holloway playing the way he has to get himself secured. And I think they need Holloway in there from a cap perspective, too. And if they move another contract, whether it be Puljujarvi or Foegele, to me, that'll level out things cap-wise and will be a good move. But the Oilers, I think, have a pleasant surprise in Holloway. He appears to be ready to go. But something's got to give here. And obviously, before they need to be cap compliant and ready to go for the beginning of the season, I do think we will see a deal. I know the Oilers media are convinced it's going to be Jesse. I think Foegele should be in that conversation just as much. To me, I'd be careful on giving up on a young Jesse Puljujarvi at this point. Obviously, Warren Foegele's a good player too, but I don't know that he's, I wouldn't sacrifice Puljujarvi for Foegele, put it that way. But we'll see what happens. The Edmonton Oilers got to do something, and it seems as though some of these young kids are making them have some tough decisions that'll lead to a trade. Now in Vancouver, a trade that we have not seen materialize yet is goaltender Michael DiPietro, who is well known now, that's requested a deal and would like to get moved on to a new organization. I think part of the reason why this has not materialized as of yet, the Vancouver Canucks wanted to wait, get a little bit further into training camp, make sure they could get their goalies they were hoping to have in the American Hockey League in Abbotsford before they go ahead and make a deal so they don't leave themselves short-handed. Today they demoted DiPietro, Colin Delia, and Arturs Silvos to the American Hockey League. The only caveat here is that Delia needs waivers. So he's on waivers today, as we talked about a little bit earlier in the video. Now, if he does not clear and he gets claimed, they're going to be short a goaltender, and they could go with DiPietro and Silvos at the AHL. Now, if Delia ends up clearing and they can put him in the American Hockey League, then I think they'd be more comfortable making a trade and having DiPietro move on, because we know that he and his agent have made it clear they wanted a fresh start, and I don't think they brought in Colin Delia or Silvos in order to be like, you know, at the East Coast League, so they're not going to demote them even further. So I don't really see a scenario here where for DiPietro to go down there either. I think he needs to play at least at the AHL level, and I think a trade will come once we know the outcome. Now, like I said, though, if Delia ends up getting claimed, which I wouldn't think he would be, but you just never know, then maybe it won't. But I think we will see that happen here over the next few days. Hard to say exactly when the trade takes place, but I think we'll have a better idea tomorrow once we know the waivers outcome. That is all your news and rumors for today. Of course, let me know your thoughts on everything discussed down in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news, rumors, and analysis on all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.